We begin here in Washington today. US President Joe Biden is facing mounting criticism from the American public. According to the latest ABC News Ipsos poll, Biden's approval rating has fallen to its lowest level yet over COVID-19, his handling of the economy and gun violence. The poll says only 28% of Americans approve of Biden's handling of the inflationary pressures that are now besetting the economy, while 69% disapprove. The US president has witnessed a drop in approval rates over his handling of the economy more broadly. 41% of Americans approved of his handling in December. That's compared to 47% back in October. Amid ongoing concerns over the Omicron variant of COVID-19, mask mandates and travel restrictions have been renewed in some parts of the United States. But the president has taken a significant hit in Americans' faith in his handling of the pandemic. 53% of people say they still approve of Joe Biden's response, but that number has dropped 20 percentage points since March. Joe Biden's approval rating also slid over his handling of gun violence and crime. This year, the United States has experienced a surge in gun violence and deaths. The president faces a 7% drop in his handling on both issues since October. According to the poll, 2/3 of Americans disapprove of Biden's handling of gun violence, while 32% approve. Those numbers are the lowest since the president took office this January. For more, let's cross live now to my colleague, WION correspondent Susan Tehrani. She joins us once again live from New York. And Susan, in none of these areas was this where the White House wanted to be as Joe Biden headed towards the end of his first year in the presidency.
Absolutely, Simon, and what a difference a year makes with those promising slogans that he had really 10, 12 months ago. But, you know, one of the issues with all of these is the way that the Biden administration has been handling these situations, from the economy to COVID to crime in recent months. One issue, I think, is the fact that President Biden himself seems to be missing in action. He hasn't been able to address the American people often enough and frequent enough and update them perhaps in person about his policies and his measures. While he does take questions from the press every now and then, he has come across as being someone who's being handled by his handlers. You can't underestimate that, and that affects his image and the way that he's handling and whether or not he himself, as the president of the United States, has a grip on what's happening in the country. And then there's the fact that he blames, and his administration blames, the economy. I mean, we can go on and on every one of these issues, but you know, it's the holiday season. Bread, just the basic staples, they are at an all-time high. Thanksgiving dinner cost the American public a very high, you know, it was very expensive, higher than it ever was in 50 years. Going out to a basic NBA game, for example, is 34% higher. An NBA ticket is 35% higher than it was even last year. You know, so you have that, you have holiday shopping, you have basic staples. That's the economy on the one hand. On the other hand, urban cities are seeing a high rate of crime. You can't go out and, you know, take your kids out in the street. And then to top it all off, the cornerstone of his administration, his campaign promise, was the coronavirus issue, and he hasn't been able to get a grip on that either. I mean, there's constant infighting, partisan infighting on the one hand, and then, you know, the issue with the American public on the other. So this is where we stand right now. I think the main issue is President Biden needs to step up and really create an image for himself that he has a grip on the country.
Susan, can we just drill down into that issue of inflation for a moment? You spoke about rising prices. We're all seeing them here in the United States. You can't avoid them. Earlier in the year, the former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers, who's not part of Joe Biden's administration, warned the White House of the risk of inflationary pressures and was absolutely dismissed angrily by the White House, who pushed back at the notion that some of the president's plans were going to create inflationary pressures in America. Now, Joe Biden is conceding, as he put it last week, that inflation is a real bump in the road. But it's a dramatic problem politically, isn't it? Because it is pocketbook issues. It is that fundamental question about whether you're better off today than you were 4 years ago or 2 years ago in the case of the midterm elections that are coming up, that are really going to bedevil the White House.
Inflation is a huge issue, and you know, there is a term that this administration has come up with, and that's permanent. That the fact that this transitory inflation might become permanent, transitory. I mean, that's sort of an oxymoron. And when Janet Yellen talks about the transitory nature of this inflation, well, the American public really can't afford that right now, coming out of COVID on the one hand, and on the other hand, telling them that inflation is going to be something that's going to sit with you for a while is not something that they were promised. And the reason I was smiling about Larry Summers was because on the one hand, you know, they couldn't come out and completely criticize Larry Summers, and on the other hand, Larry Summers at that time sort of felt he didn't really feel bad, but he had to sort of sidetrack and say, listen, I agree with everything President Biden is doing, but this one thing you really have to be careful with, and here we are right now. But when you talk about inflation, the problem is it's not just inflation. It means that cost of living is not only going high, but the value of living is also going low. And it's not just the holiday season. I mean, you can blame it on the supply chain crisis, but then you have rents going up. You have the cost of education going up. And those aren't things that are stuck on a ship and the coast of California, for example. You know, rents aren't stuck on a ship over there. So this is a main issue. It's a big issue. The Republicans, yes, are going to take advantage of that. It is going to cost the Democrats seats, absolutely. But at the end of the day, it is hurting the American public, and that's something that this administration cannot deny. Their economic policies failed tremendously, and giving free checks in the mail is really not going to help them. They want to get back to work, and I don't think Americans are used to seeing inflation like this. I mean, I think you would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very difficult to tell people that prices aren't rising when they feel it every day in their pockets. And those inflation numbers that came out last Friday, the greatest rate of increase in the United States since 1982. Susan Tehrani, live for us, WION's correspondent in New York. Thanks very much for being there again today. We'll talk to you again soon.